topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. So excited to be here with you all. So it's Tuesday morning and just a phenomenal day. The sun is out. Can't ask for a better day. So talking about kindness, something really beautiful happened. One of the readers from my book reached out to me, and her name is Reka, and I want to give her a huge shout out. And she invited me to be on her blog. So it's so wonderful that how that circle gets completed, that we write from heart, we are there to support our readers, and then that connection happens. So if you have got our books, I want to thank you. Really appreciate it. And for those who have not got our books, please go to Amazon, get our books, because it's a 3 ways that we work together. One is the books are here to help you. Then second, you are helping us spread the message. And then third is that from the proceeds, we give partial profits to kiva.org. So you're helping entrepreneurs. And then connect with me, because I'm telling you, I love hearing from my readers, just like I love hearing from you, my dear audience. So that's how we do. And let's bring in our guest. Welcome, Becky.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. So share with us if you recall a moment or a person from your youth or childhood that left a positive mark on you.
Oh gosh, I've been blessed. I've had many. I would probably say my godmother, my aunt. She was a teacher. She just had a very positive outlook on life. Watched her, raise a family, have a career, love children, just loved the beach, just really had, and had such a heart for hospitality. Grew up in the Midwest and battled breast cancer, and just always had a positive outlook on everything. Just enjoyed life. She was always happy. She had a lot of wit. Just enjoyable and always a safe place to land.
Definitely. So Midwest, I can definitely tell you, like, we had gone to Minnesota and like kind of went through Wisconsin and the neighboring states, and I forget the name of the national park in Minnesota. Beautiful place. And as we drove down through, people were so lovely, very nice, and so friendly. So I definitely get that. So
yeah, it's a great. I have a tremendous extended family in the Midwest, and they come from roots of farming and just really good family people.
Yeah, I forget the name of a town, and there were like Norwegian people, and just so helpful. Like every turn that we made, just smiling, and it almost seemed like a town out of Hallmark movie.
Yeah.
So kind of coming back to your story, as you grew up, did you have any specific interests?
I think sports athletics was kind of around our family all the time. So I enjoyed the water. I enjoyed we did a lot of activities, and I enjoyed the beach, the water skiing, things like that. Um, and I don't know exactly where, but somewhere along the way, there was probably my mom, this thread towards business and this thread towards watching the markets. I dabble in the markets on a regular basis. I follow the markets closely. I'm trading every day. Those are just kind of like some interest I had. And although I started out on the educational side, I always had kind of this, I was always looking beyond that, from just always had an interest on the business side.
Mm. Yeah, no, definitely. And right now the markets are all over the place, but that's outside. Like, okay, so tell me, like you mentioned about the education piece. So what was that time in your life and how did that pan out?
I always liked school. And so going to school was, I liked it. I enjoyed school. All the way through. My teachers just I know some people just struggle with school per se, but I always enjoyed it. And I think I had a little bit of influence. Both my parents didn't go to college, so for them it was kind of new territory. But I enjoyed it. When I was 17, I decided I wanted to go away to school, and so I just kind of made that venture, and I did that. And then I ended up getting an undergraduate and graduate degree. And at the time it was health and physical education. And then I went back later and got an MBA. I'm in the process of, I'm an older parent with a Gen Z daughter that's just getting ready to graduate high school and moving into those decisions. And, from an education standpoint, so much has changed.
Oh,
I mean, we could spend an enormous amount of time just talking about that, and especially young people today and the way they're learning and the way they look at things. But the traditional paths of declaring a major, doing one thing and one job, so much of that has changed. It's estimated now that we're going to have 12, somewhere close to a dozen jobs in 3 to 7 different careers. And so, you have a workforce and an economy and a world that is changing at such a rapid speed, as in your work in AI. But you have that, and you have all of that is also perpetuating the way young people are
right.
learning today.
Yeah,
So you have all
absolutely
of
right.
these things kind of playing a role at the same time, and different opportunities.
Yeah. So you mentioned that, people are going to have 12 jobs, and that's one of the things nobody talks about. People are still, as you mentioned, people are still talking about the major and,
Mhm.
what they're having that straight path. So that's not there. So what does that mean for today's workforce?
Well, I think number one, when you take a look, and this in your background on technology, I mean, the average amount of time that, skills can be outdated within 6 months anymore. So if we're not upskilling, reskilling, stacking skills and moving in that direction and constantly staying up with the tools in our industry or the lane that we're in and that we're working in, you're constantly going to be kind of running from behind. So I think we have that. And from a digital standpoint, digital literacy, data literacy, all of those skills related to that are huge today. But beyond that, you've got to be nimble, and you've got to be able to be resourceful, and you've got to be able to pivot. And I talk about in my book, the first couple of chapters are just related to the foundation of job security today, because so much of that has changed. And, we grew up at a time, and my parents and the generations, where it was 1 or 2 jobs and you had that job security. And I think we as individuals, we want to be able to believe or think that the company's going to protect us, or the organization's going to protect us, or even our own business we're going to be able to rely on. And you just can't rely on any of those things anymore. And so, one of the other things I talk about in the book is developing, the number one essential skill, and that's to be able to monetize your skills and know how to do that and be able to leverage. So it's really important that I try to tell my daughter to think multiple careers now, many careers. If you may start out in this, and this is going to be where you want to start out, and that's great. And there are some people that are going to start out and stay in the same lane, and that's great too. And if they have a passion and they're performing and they're growing and they're learning and they love what they're doing, then more power to them, and they should stay there. But for the way
Yeah,
things are moving and changing, it's got to be, you have to be very nimble today.
yeah, definitely. So it brings up a couple of talking points. One is that, it's important to be reskilling all the time. So now when you're talking about reskilling, based on your experience, what would you recommend for our audience? Reskilling in their own line of work or looking for the others?
Yeah. So I think it's really important if they have a direction and they have a path. I think it's super important because, the reskilling is just one component of it. But if you don't know where you're going, or you don't know, what you want to be doing next, or what your plan is, then there's so many opportunities to reskill. You can kind of get lost. It's the same with the tools that we use today, right? So it's important that they think about what they're doing now and what does it look like in their industry or in their particular sector in their industry, and what are the new tools coming, and where do they want to, if they're going to stay in that lane, then they have to stay up with what's happening in that particular sector so that they're ahead of the path.
Mm-hmm. So definitely. So what I'm hearing is that having that clarity around where they're going, and
Yeah.
also knowing, like, what are their strengths, because the skills are transferable. So as you mentioned, before you jump into the reskilling, be clear about it, like where you're going and what are your strengths. And then depending on that, also looking into where the market is going. And when we talk about market, it's about different companies, the different directions. So for currently, AI has taken over and the whole landscape has changed. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's, market timing is really important. And I don't care what field or industry you go into. I started my business 30 years ago because I couldn't find a job. And at the time, I wanted to be in women's sports marketing, and there was no business or industry or market there. So I created a publication in the industry. And from there, I created a sports marketing agency, and then the online career center, and all of these things. But I created these things. But and then I started my search firm 25 years ago with a specialty in women and diversity hiring. And back then it was just a success to get a meeting on the topic. But timing is important. So, and you take a look at where we are now, and you take a look at kind of some of the areas that I was in, and market timing is critical. So I think that's important. You look at EVs and what's happening in electric vehicles, and 20 years ago, nobody thought that was going to be anything to be part of today. But, you look at the auto industry as an example, and now you've got to have people that are capable of fixing these vehicles and doing these types of things. So it is important to know where industries are going and where the growth looks like it's going to be in the future. And you've got to try to just stay up on that. And it's hard to stay up on all the sectors. So you really kind of got to focus in on where you are and what's happening around you, but always be looking at what's happening in the economy, what's happening in the world at large.
I want to come back. That makes sense. I want to come back to what you mentioned earlier. You said that there was no need, or there was a need, but there was nothing like a sports marketing agency. So tell us a little bit more about that time. So one thing is like, okay, what does market want? Another thing is finding a gap and creating a niche and carving out a path for yourself. So tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So, what does the market want and the timing? I mean, I was in it at women's sports as a market had, these peaks and valleys constantly, where people thought, oh, it was here, and I had gotten in and started my publication in 1995. The 96 Olympics were right around the corner. The women, took over and won the gold medals. The WNBA was just being launched in 97, the ABL, another competing basketball league. and I was in it with a group of women and people that, we had thought, my colleagues, that women's sports had kind of made it. We were on the rise at that particular time. And then I watched, I was fortunate to probably have one of the longest standing businesses in women's sports at that particular time, but everybody was dropping off. Sports Illustrated for Women's Magazine, a lot of these big names, and people had put money behind it. Some of the leagues had gotten 30 million in funding and put money behind it, but the market wasn't there. And it was not sustainable at that particular time. Had I known what I know now about market research and things like that, and really taking a look at it, if I had really looked at it from the nuts and bolts standpoint, I probably would have said, well, there's not really a market there. But to your point, your second point of finding a niche, what I did recognize when I was looking for a job in the market was there wasn't anything. It was very fragmented. So I could create a publication, I billed it as the #1 information resource, and it covered business development, corporate sponsors, a need that was missing. And then I had a little section in the back that was related to jobs. And so I kind of created this publication, which became a loss leader. And then it opened the door to consulting, opened the door to launching a sports marketing agency, and then working with companies and actually doing that work for 10 years, doing it. So, I think there's something to be said for creating things when you look and you see that there's something that's not there. And I think it's also important to recognize, is the market really going to be sustainable for the kind of business that you want to run?
Very insightful. Is it going to be sustainable? And also, depending on your goals and what you want to achieve in life, are you looking for sustainability and along with it scaling? Because if you have big dreams, it's also important to kind of focus on okay, I've got the idea, and is it sustainable? Is it scalable? So in terms of business, usually people talk about minimum viable product. So did you have that in your mind, or you just kind of?
No, I mean, I wrote my book. Part of writing my book was all the lessons learned, right? And there is a chapter in there on working for yourself and running your own business, and asking these questions before you just jump in. So I pretty much have made all the mistakes out there. But I think it's I never looked at or focused. I was following a passion. And I never looked at and focused on, was I going to make money? How was I going to make money? I learned to generate revenue probably a dozen different ways, but I didn't come from that mindset of thinking about that, of scaling a business, or thinking about, profit and loss and the balance sheet and that sort of thing. I just jumped in and created. And so, those are part of the lessons learned.
Definitely. So, okay, now we have talked about quite a few things. So, visiting back to when you had said, learning how to monetize your skills. So, you do talk about a 3-career strategy that people can use. So, how would they use that to monetize their skills?
Well, I think it's important. The reason why I say 3 careers is because we start out and, for many people, we might work 20, 25 years. I mean, we look at what's happening today. We are living longer. We are working longer. Many people want to work longer. Many people don't want to retire in the old, traditional way that, people used to. So whether it's a side hustle, whether, whatever it is that they're doing, I think that it's natural to do something X amount of years and think, okay, I really want to do something different now. I want to challenge myself and do something different. And then maybe I want to do something in my last chapter. So I think by thinking that way, we don't get so stuck in just one lane and feel like this is all I know how to do or can do. So I think that's important. But the other thing is, in terms of deciding and managing your career, one of the things that the focus of the book is the STEEP Qualifications. And that's something I created after working with people for so many years, and myself and my job and career changes, and really recognizing and looking at how can I help people manage their careers better? How can we do this better? Because we look at financial management, we look at health management, all of these different things. But when it comes to managing our careers, we're not really following any sort of framework. And so when I really looked at it, the STEEP Qualifications, your skills, the tools, your education, your experience, and your personal qualities. Those are the things that you can take with you through any career path. You have to align it to what that is and your goals are within that career path. But if you always go back to where it's a good starting point. So if I'm working with somebody who wants to make a career transition, we're going to go back to your STEEP qualifications. Let's just start from where you are today. What are your skills? What are the tools that you have? What's your education been? What is your experience been? And then I want to know a little bit about the personal qualities that are going to help them get up that ladder or get through that tunnel or whatever it is, cross that river that they want. But that's the starting point. And then if you start there and you just focus on that in terms of which direction you want to go, that's going to be a framework you can use with you regardless of what you do or what direction you go.
Definitely. So as we talk about that, you mentioned about that, a lot of people are deciding not to retire traditionally. And then in some cases, people are not able to retire because they have not saved enough. So we are finding that a lot of baby boomers are coming back to work. And now while we have baby boomers there, then we also have the Gen Z stepping into the workforce. So when we are looking at these two generations with such different values, when you kind of look at the intergenerational communication and generation gap, so what would you say are some of the ways that they can work together?
Gosh, I think and that's such a great question, Diva. It's something right now we're not embracing in the workforce that if we did, it could help in so many ways. I think that certainly the baby boomers, have they're dependable. They know what a work week is like, a traditional work week. They've been there. They've got great leadership skills. They've got management skills. They've got time management skills. They've got project management skills. We need that in the workforce today. We have a younger generation that and also they also may be lacking some of the digital skills, right? Or not as fast and up to speed as we see the Gen Z and the younger, generations that are just growing up with it. The younger generations could benefit from all of those things that the baby boomers have to bring back to the workforce or that have in the workforce today. And it would be such a great mentor match because the younger ones can move quickly with speed and quickly with technology, but sometimes they lack that maybe taking the time to communicate, the communication skills, whether it's just a short text, whether it's, taking the time to have a thorough conversation, to go over the details, or whether it's, they're moving so fast that those types of things are things that they're not used to. Many of them have not worked outside of a remote situation. They're not getting that collaboration or that mentorship of knowing when to speak in a meeting, when not to speak in a meeting, what their role is, how to be part of a team, but understand what their role is and where their contribution is supposed to be. So these types of things we could, bring together and I believe really make a difference in our GDP and our productivity today if we could figure out how to harness that better.
Absolutely. And at the same time, we could have reverse mentoring, which I'm a strong proponent of, where the Gen Z could mentor baby boomers, helping them with technology.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And that marriage between the two generations, like taking the wisdom from one and then taking the technology, as you mentioned, we could increase the productivity and bring our country even further on the map than where it is. So definitely. So as we are talking through so many different areas for careers, there are still inherent risks which people may not be aware of. So can you share some of the risks that our audience can focus on, become aware of it, and how could they move through those?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's ever been a time that I have seen anyway where people's careers are more at risk than they are today. And, you have the things we've talked about with the economy, geopolitical risks, you have all of, industries changing, technology, AI changing. So you have all of those things. But adding to that, we have a very a culture that's very challenging today, and there's all kinds of risks within that culture. We have online today where anybody's career can be taken down in a moment's notice with a posting. People can lose jobs, lose opportunities because of an email sent here or there. The risks of something surfacing in somebody's life, 10 years from now, 15 years or ago, 20 years ago, those types of things were never risked before. Now they are. And somebody's livelihood can be taken down just in a moment's notice because of things like that. So cancel culture, any of these types of things. And, for people that, we're in a situation where it's really, really hard to protect yourself from any of those things. You protecting yourself from discrimination. I've had many people over time, maybe somebody has found something in their background because of a posting that they did, 15 years ago at a wedding or this or that, and they lose out on opportunities. We never had those kinds of risks that you have today. So I think all the things combined, economies in flux, different things affecting one another, all of these types of things. And then, of course, the cost of living and inflation and all of those types of things play a role. So we're just incredibly vulnerable today in our jobs and careers.
Absolutely. So sometimes it can just kind of come down to survival. What would you say are one or two skills that people need to develop, and that it's essential actually to develop those to
Yeah.
survive before
Yeah.
we even go to thriving?
And it really is. You just never know what we're going to be faced with tomorrow, right? So it is survival. So I think one of the things is it's important to have cash flow no matter what. And that's, when you think about job security today, we rely on only one. Typically people rely on their employer and they think, okay, that's it. And I don't think that we can live that way anymore. I think that I want people to think about it as, how am I going to set myself up to protect myself with some cash flow stream? So I think it's important that, yes, you've got a good job and you maintain employment. There's lots of times where people are out of work for 6 months, a year, 2 years. They don't think it's going to be that long. So I think maintaining employment is important. Don't quit a job before you have a job. I did that too, all of these types of things. But then I think it's also, figuring out where and how can you monetize skills you have, whether it's those same skills or whether it's other skills. I have neighbors who have orchards and sell at farmers markets. I know people that whether it's an Airbnb, whether they're monetizing their skills, maybe they're an accountant and they're helping neighbors with taxes during tax season, whatever the case is, trying to make sure that you've got some other things lined up with cash flow so that when the unexpected does happen, you're at least prepared to pivot temporarily until you can figure out what you're going to do next, and it's not going to take down your entire life.
Yeah, no, definitely some really great points over there. And seeing how while you're doing in your current lifestyle, what could you do? And actually, one of my clients kind of knew that, well, he hadn't prepared himself from ahead of the time, but he knew that he was going to get laid off. And fortunately, he had like 4 to 5 months. And he's like, okay, what could I do? And I said, explore, what is comfortable for you? What could you do? And he picked up tutoring. So, which was maybe 3 or 4 hours per day. And it allowed him to continue to apply for jobs and also have, besides having that pay, that additional cash flow in case if he didn't find the job within the months where he had his severance pay. So it worked out. He got it, but then he kept that side gig for just 2 or 3. And then one of my clients picked up on just dog sitting because she loves it. And
Mm-hmm.
over the weekend, and surprisingly, she says, "Oh, I'm able to pay for my vacations." So
Sure.
it all depends, what's comfortable for you and what's kind of working through.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us, what is next for you, Becky?
Oh gosh. Well, I've got to get a daughter graduated. I think looking for ways to how I can use my experience to help other people, whether it's, the Gen Zs struggling with what they're trying to figure out to do, the baby boomers, those in the middle making career transitions, people contemplating, do I want to start a business? What should I think about before? I want to make a career transition. I don't know how. I think it's just as we've talked about career management today and our livelihoods and the world that we're living in today, it's incredibly stressful. And so feeling secure in your job, feeling secure in your work, and also enjoying what you do, getting up every day and feeling passionate about what you're doing and enjoying that. I think it's important. And if I can help people at least get closer to that and feel a little bit more in control and managing and controlling their destiny so that somebody else doesn't, then, if I can help a few people do that, then I'll be doing what I want to be doing.
Absolutely. So share us, where people can connect with you, where can they find your book?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you again for having me. So BeckyHeidesch.com is the website, and there'll be, things coming along there as we're developing and doing more things there. And as far as my book, it's on Amazon. You can pick it up there, The Career Masterclass for Women, Staying Marketable and Succeeding in a Changing Business World. I'll say the tips, tools, strategies, and tactics in there, even though the book is written for women, is applicable to all. So it's all kind of a catch-all of things that I think would be helpful for people at any phase, maybe that resource on the book that they can go to when they need it.
Definitely. Any last thoughts you'd like to share with our audience?
Hang in there. It's a changing time, but it also can be an exciting time. And, I would say keep an eye on, don't lose sight of your passions, but keep an eye also on, the intersection of your passions and your skill and the opportunities.
Definitely. So change is the time when you can innovate. And yes, change can be daunting, but always remember, change is not something that's happening to you, but change is something that you could be leading. So as you shared, Becky, it's important that, we look at it as a time to innovate, and which may mean pivoting or doing whatever is needed so that it becomes that exciting time for you. Thank you, Becky, for joining us and sharing your insights. And
thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the listeners.
Thank you, wonderful audience, for being with us. And I know some of you have been with us for years, probably not sure, we've been doing this for 8 to 9 years or even more. So I want to appreciate you, each and every one of you. And as Becky mentioned, times are tough. Reach out to us. Let us know. How can we support you? What are the topics you would like? And I promise you, I'll bring those experts for you so that you can live the life you deserve. Thank you, Juan, for making the show possible. Be well and take care until next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who've experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.